Welcome back, Nation. It's time for September's classic album review. I know it's a little late, it's very close to the end of the month, but as you can tell, there's been a wave of new releases, not to mention I experienced some family issues that needed to be rectified, so I apologize for being so late. However, it is in September. And the timing is perfect, actually, because we're not going to talk about just one album today, kind of like what we did last month, but only instead of it being 2 or 3, we're going to reflect on the career of Pink Floyd. The reason for this is because, of course, this past Tuesday, each one of their studio albums was remastered and re-released. And this also includes a gigantic box set for Dark Side of the Moon. It also includes the complete Discovery pack, which includes all 14 studio albums. And there will also be other packs coming. One for Wish You Were Here, one for The Wall, that will be massive, kind of like the Dark Side of the Moon version as well. I wanted to actually get some pictures of this, but doing that while on the clock at work is a little difficult, especially whenever you have a lot to do. Pink Floyd, however, is a band that really needs no introduction. There's a lot of you, in fact all of you, know the words, the name Pink Floyd. And if you don't, then that's going to be very surprising to me if you've never heard of the band. This band really was at the forefront of the psychedelic rock movement. It started in the early 60s and they continued it throughout the 1970s. They put a lot of personality into their work. Their early work was seen as more psychedelic than some of their latter eras. However, at all points in time, no matter which way you put it, this is the ultimate in stoner. This is the ultimate stoner band, the ultimate in stoner rock, the ultimate in stoner classic rock. The albums such as Piper, The Gates at Dawn, and more, and Metal, we saw a very psychedelic side to this band, where they were able to use very lavish atmospheres that incorporated almost a minimalistic sense in order to create environments that could only be seen as, well, hallucinogenic. Something that if you took the right substance, you were going to see things that you've never seen before. You were going to hear things that you never heard before, and you were going to experience things in a whole completely different light. Whenever you move on to their 1970s status with albums such as Animals, such as Wish You Were Here, and such as The Wall, you still do hear that psychedelic flavor. You still hear the randomness of some of the sound clips that don't really always sync up to the music. The reason for that is because it's trying to deliver some sort of message or further on some sort of concept. However, they would write albums for fallen members such as Syd Barrett, which was the real basis for the album Wish You Were Here. The Wall, of course, is the massive double album that was turned into a feature film that many people consider to be one of the trippiest films that they have ever watched. It's one of those things where many people will watch this album when not in their right head deliberately to see what it is that they would see. And the imagery is all very powerful. After Roger Waters left, it was kind of a different ballgame. The Final Cut being his last album with the band, and only 2 albums were produced after that, which was which was A Momentary Lapse of Reason, should I say, and The Division Bell. And both of these albums are very, very different and incorporate a little bit more of a radio rock sound in some locations, but still also maintain that same Pink Floyd trippiness and that same individualistic characteristic that makes Pink Floyd who they are. All in all, these studio albums range from good to bad. It really only depends upon your taste. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to say that Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall still retains their top pick as the album that they love the most, or even Wish You Were Here. I take a slightly different approach. I really enjoy the work on Animals the most, because I think this shows their progressive side probably more than many of the other albums, if not all of them. With songs such as Dogs, which retains its spot after all these years as my favorite Pink Floyd song, you can clearly see that this was a band that was really able to take on and wear many different hats, and each and every time that they tried an experience really do a fantastic job. The album that I actually enjoy the least is The Final Cut, which is supposed to be the follow-up to The Wall, kind of like a part 2. And to me, it really just didn't size up. There was a lot of work on here that just felt like it was forced, that it was just thrown together and put onto the disc. That way they could have one more release before Roger left the band in order to go solo. And that's exactly what he did. Roger Waters had a solo career, and David Gilmour has also had a solo career, and Syd Barrett did as well, releasing a pair of solo albums. The Final Cut to me just was the album that did not really, it didn't click for me, and maybe in a different time, a different place, one day it will. However, today, and all the days prior to this, ever since I started listening to the band, they have not been that day. Pink Floyd has also been a force on the Billboard 200 and sales-wise. This is a band that has sold tens to 50s of millions of records, for one. Dark Side of the Moon is one of the most beloved albums of all time. Same with The Wall. They spent so many months, years on the Billboard Top 200, over 1,000 for Dark Side of the Moon alone. This is a band that really has a lot of lasting power in society today, and their influence has been felt all the way up to this point. If you remember last year, I did a triptych, which was entitled the Metal Triptych, which described how Pink Floyd's unique sound has become incorporated into metal music of today, which was released almost 40 years later. I examined metal and then made it a transition to Knockmistium's black metal, and then made the transition to Neurosis through Silver and Blood. Now this is seen in many other bands as well, so these two are not the only two. In fact, there's a whole entire movement of bands that do things in this style and in this vein. So it's very clear to tell that there is a lot of influence that Pink Floyd has offered to the world. Even though they haven't recorded a studio album now in 17 years, and even though Roger Waters has been absent from the band on studio recordings since the early 1980s. This is a band that will always have lasting power and will always be beloved. So this is what I issue to you guys. This is what I issue to the Cover Killer Nation today. Pink Floyd is a band that is very, very pivotal in knowing your roots, especially if you are a fan of the stoner metal genre, enjoy stoner rock, or just enjoy classic and psychedelic rock in general. You don't necessarily have to smoke reefer or drop mushrooms or acid in order to enjoy this music. So if Pink Floyd is something that's eluded your catalog, now's the time to actually introduce yourself to the band. Extend your hand and say, hello, I am whoever you are, and introduce yourself to their music. And for those of you who already have, but may only have a few albums, such as myself, though I've listened to them all, now's also the perfect time in order to complete your collection. Even if you dislike remasters, it's just something where the sound is going to be a lot more rich, so the environment may actually change and be more powerful. This is something I recommend for all of you, and Pink Floyd will be a lasting power and something that will be felt in the musical community. The waves will be felt for probably centuries to come. In fact, this might be a band that you never hear somebody say, who? But instead, they'll say, oh yeah, I remember Pink Floyd. They'll be like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, where people will constantly seek out their albums. New fans will come, and they won't even need any sort of conversion point. They'll just hear stories. They'll hear tales. They'll hear the songs on the radio, which are still on classic rock and modern rock stations. And they'll think, wow, that was really powerful. I need to check these guys out. And they will. Pink Floyd might not be a band that sells 100,000 to 1,000,000 records each and every year. They were at one point, but of course time changes all things. But they will be a band that you'll never see selling only 10 albums in 1 year, or perhaps 500. There will always be a demand for this band, and this band will always be close to my heart as one of my favorites. And now, I extend that invitation once again onto you, after offering my heartfelt thanks to Pink Floyd, and my heartfelt desire to complete my own collection. How about you?